Welcome to LinkedIn Live, and this is Andy Hallett, and we're about to be joined by Charles Causey. We're just getting Charles set up in true live fashion. It's not gone all to plan, but if anyone out there is watching, we're going to get going as quickly as possible. So Charles is just joining the stream. Modern technology. There we go.
There we go. A few different links going on, but we're all good at this point.
We're all good. It's all about getting in the same room, being on the same page, as you'd expect. Charles, how are you?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, not so bad. Now we're over the stress of how to actually get onto the LinkedIn Live and all together. It's all about now how we can build profitable businesses in the US. So we can talk about that. Charles, for anyone who doesn't.
I will say we're in the process of moving. So I was picking paint colors with my wife at 6 a.m. And I can tell you one thing, at least for me, how to open and drive growth in USA is a lot less stressful than picking paint colors with the wife. So I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Good to hear. So, Charles, for those of you who don't know you, quick intro.
Sure, absolutely. So Charles Causey, and I run Agile Partnering. We basically help staffing companies, whether they're domestic or based out of the UK or elsewhere in the world, to easily and profitably start up and scale up in the USA, hence the title. And that's what we do. So we're back office, employer of record, payroll funding, all the bits.
Fantastic. And for those who don't know me, I'm Andy Hallett. I used to be important, but not anymore. So that's me. Great. Well, Charles, thanks for coming on board. Last month, we talked about turnkey, your product for established enterprise firms. But this month, we're going to go back to brass tacks, and we're going to address, I guess, the biggest question, and one of the biggest questions that comes up in our groups is, how do I start in the US? Where do I even go? It all looks, and this is primarily coming from people who are attacking this from the UK or Europe, or perhaps even folk in the US that are setting up their own contracting business. So how do you start right there? And what's the first piece of advice?
Sure. Yeah, there's probably a few things that come to mind there. We can talk about the nuts and bolts of it, right? Like all the technical aspects of it. I think the place that I typically like to go to first in that conversation is really around who are you going to target? I think I speak with, I speak with a lot of recruitment companies thinking about starting up. And sometimes I get the sense that they're thinking about breaking into the USA is sort of like that's the goal. And I always encourage people, like, the USA is massive. It is a huge country geographically in terms of DGP for the entire country. And so I always encourage people, start with your niche, like find your niche, whether it's geographic, whether it's within a certain sector, et cetera, and really get clear on who are the first 1, 2, or 3 clients or types of clients that you want to go focus on, that you can be phenomenal at actually serving, right? Finding the clients and making the placements. And then all the nuts and bolts things that we help with, like those things they're important, they're necessary. It's like plumbing, it's got to be done correctly. You don't want bad plumbing, but those things can be easily sorted out. So for me, it's a lot about figuring out where you're going to focus first,
Finding that other focus. And I think the other thing for me as well is that folks look at it as the USA. And I think when you get there, you realize it's 50 different countries in terms of, not only the plumbing, as you say, the actual, the legislation, the taxation, the rules, but also as well the culture. And that for me was probably the big takeaway when I started working with our US business.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I'll be in New York in a few weeks, and I currently live in the state of Georgia, and I used to live in Colorado, and I can tell you all three of those are very different. Our accents, well, the New York accent, that's a far cry, but culturally, it is different. And the sectors that flourish in these places are different. And those 3 places are different than, say, Raleigh, North Carolina, or Austin, Texas, and Miami. I mean, those are all very, very different culture, very different markets. So yeah, that's the first big piece of advice or suggestion. It's the thing that I see that our most successful clients doing, which is they get really, really focused and they even drill down from there. When you're establishing a beachhead, I see a lot of people spin their wheels thinking about all the different opportunities, but focus, I really feel like that's the most important thing.
I was talking to a founder the other day, and we were talking about niche, as you'll need to learn to call it in the US. And the previous thing was you need to be an inch wide, mile deep. And what I'm hearing now is you need to be an inch wide, 5 miles deep. You need to really, really 5x whatever it is you're doing in your niche.
Yeah, it's funny you say it, because I spoke with a client probably 3 weeks ago, and I was just asking him, I was like, look, you've gone from 0 to 25, 30 contractors in a short span of time. How did you do it? And he said, Charles, it's really simple. And then this is literally his words. He said, Charles, I literally found a niche that I knew, and he had career background in that space. So he actually did know it well, right? He's not Googling. He's not a 22-year-old out of college just trying to, he really knew the space well. And he said, I thought I was going to place the type of role that I used to be in, but I realized it was too competitive. There wasn't enough demand, relatively speaking. So I went a layer down, and I began to fill the role that used to report to my role. And I only did that role. That was the only type of role that I would fill, period, and only within a geographic space and only for a specific type of client. And he's building a little empire there. I mean, he's now doing it. And he summarized it saying, I literally started niche and then I drilled down from there. And I think that, I know it's simple, but it's, at least for, I think, most entrepreneurs, for most of us who start companies, it's easy to get caught up with opportunity or the next shiny thing. And that's natural. Then we need entrepreneurs to do that. But when you're getting started in America, I just always encourage people, I almost don't care which niche it is. It doesn't have to be the hottest thing, right? It's the one where you can be successful and get really, really deep. Like you said, I like what you said, inch wide, like 5 miles deep, go really deep. Because all you really need, I think, is, I see our clients do this, get 1 or 2 customers, start to build a name there, and then you begin to get other roles, you begin to get other clients, you begin to get referrals, and that's where you can make some real money.
Absolutely. So a couple of my customers in the UK they're looking at the moment. So and we're going through this exercise. So this is very real for me right now. We've been on that journey with a number of others before. So I'm interested in your sort of opinions on the questions we're having and going through the project plan basically. So first and foremost, when do you need to incorporate in the US?
Yeah, so maybe I'll riff on this for just a minute. I have in my mind, I've actually got a slide if we want to pull it up, but we can talk through it. I think to start, what I would call a 3-phase roadmap, if you will. And I see a lot of people jump to phase 2 or phase 3, and I would say unnecessarily. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to do, but I don't think it's necessary. And I'll walk you through those phases. Let's say scenario 1 is you're a UK business, right, or elsewhere, but we'll say you're a UK staffing company. You've got a business in the UK, maybe you're doing perm, maybe you're doing contract, maybe you're doing a mix of both. And you say, you know what, I want to expand in the USA. Maybe you've already got a client connection over there, or you've got some way to get in, but you know what you're going to focus on.
Yeah. And
a lot of people start with just doing perm in the US, and that's easy to do from the UK, right? You can service it from the UK. You have your client will have you sign a W-8-BEN form. It's a tax form. It's not a big deal. Very easy to do. And then you can service those perm relationships. But as soon as you want to make contract placement, phase 1 is what I would call remote. And that's where you use your UK entity. You can use an in-country employer of record like Agile Partnering or others. There's not a ton of us out there actually that specialize in this particular niche. But you can actually use that employer of record to sign a staffing agreement in country with your client. And the language that I tell my clients is you can just explain to your clients that you're using a specialized back office and compliance provider that will be the entity on the staffing agreement. And then effectively, what we're doing in that scenario is we're making contract placements as easy as permanent placements. There's no cash up front. You can literally get that first agreement or 2 signed. The EOR is going to provide all the insurances to the client. They're going to hold the liabilities. They're going to employ the workers, payroll the workers, fund the workers, and you get a margin-only payment. That's what I call sort of phase 1. So I'll pause there. Am I doing a decent job of explaining that right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm to sort of break that down, the permanent, absolutely fine. You send your invoices, they get paid, and as long as you're below a certain threshold, you can continue to do that remotely for a while. When you get to contract, exactly the same. You're effectively being the introducer service. You obviously maintain relationships with the candidate, with the client, but someone else is doing all the hard lifting. So they are doing the employment, They're doing onboarding, they're doing the drug screens, they're doing everything you need to get that worker going, making sure they've got their, their correct compensation, making sure that the worker classification is correct, and yeah, you're all good.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And what you just described, those are all sort of core employee record duties, plus the payroll funding component. The thing that's missing, the thing that's not required of the staffing company, which is really nice in phase one, which is the remote phase, is you don't need to set up a UK entity. You don't even need to set up a UK bank account.
Sorry, if you want entity.
Excuse me, a US. Yeah, you need an entity somewhere in the world, right? But you don't need to set up a USA bank account or a USA entity. You don't need any of those things, because the in-country employer of record is going to be able to fulfill all those obligations. And this is why I encourage a lot of people just to start there, because you don't have to stay there, right? If you just start there and get 1, 2, 5, 10 contractors running, and you get that gross profit rolling into your books, then at that point, I encourage people to move to phase two. And phase two is where I encourage people, now that you've proven your market with minimal risk and total and absolute speed, because to be clear, like phase one, we can have people set up in 24 hours and ready to onboard an end client. So this is very quick, very easy.
So literally, I'm in the UK. It's Monday afternoon. My client says we've got some jobs in the US. I've got some people that, I find some candidates, they can be working Tuesday, Wednesday.
They would not be able to be working Tuesday, Wednesday, but you would be ready to send a contract to your client that day or the day after. That's how quickly we can get you set up. And then the client has to sign terms. And then there's probably a few days before your worker starts, but call within a week. I mean, I'll give you an example. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from some of my referral. This is sort of, typical sales flow for us. And he says, Charles, hey, we've been working permanent deals in the US. We've been doing it from the UK. We don't even have a USA entity, but our client just gave us an opportunity to fill some contract roles. Not sure what to do. We don't want to set up an entity. We don't want to have insurances. We just want to make the money. I said, no problem. So we signed for us, it's called our full service agreement. And then by that afternoon, they were able to send a template staffing agreement to their client. They explain the relationship, and then they're off to the races. So super fast. Now, when you're really big, you don't want to be using an Agile Partnering or another EOR to sign your staffing agreements. Ultimately, you're going to outgrow that. But in that first phase, when you're just trying to establish a beachhead, it's super clean and simple.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
I guess as well, the other thing now we're getting into some interesting terminology, and when I talk to people around this, I always take it from not everybody knows. So the different types of employment you get in the States for contracting.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'm going to run through just the other couple phases real quickly in case
you go for that. And could I just remind people as well, as much as I'm trying to knock you off track with questions, this is a LinkedIn Live. So if you do have questions for Charles or myself, just pop them in the chat, and at an appropriate time, we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah, I would love questions. I just want this to be useful for everybody. So let's say that you've got somebody who they're already establishing their entity, or maybe they've already got a couple contractors, they're using an MR, and they're wondering, at what point do I need to establish? That's what I would call phase two. That's where you basically land. You simply set up a USA entity. You're going to need to purchase the requisite insurances. You'll have some choices to make around how you fund it and how you engage those workers. But that would be sort of a phase two. And then eventually it's phase three, which is you expand. Now you're actually talking about hiring people in country in the USA to be your employees underneath your USA entity. But that's a really nice runway that people can use. And you can cycle through that whole runway in a year, or you can take 5 years to do that. The thing that I'd encourage people not to do is, unless you've got real capital and you're 100% confident in this plan, I've seen some people waste a lot of money. We're talking like multiple 6 figures, jumping all the way to entity, insurances, hiring an internal team, and it doesn't work out. They can't get cash flow positive fast enough. In most cases, there's not a need to take on that much risk and capital investment up front. You can do it in a phased approach. And then you asked me about employer types. We want to talk about compliance.
Yes. Sorry, yeah. So your W-2s, to your corp to corps, to your 1099s. These are phrases that get get thrown around.
Yes. Yeah, so we don't have an IR35 per se in the United States. Unfortunately, it's a lot messier. It's actually very frustrating in the United States because it's not as clean, and the laws for what's called worker classification, which is the topic that we're talking about right now, those can actually vary by state. Some are stricter than others. The breakdown is basically as follows. Whenever you're going to engage a worker, they're going to be either a W-2 worker or what's called an independent contractor. For independent contractor, you'll hear multiple terms that are tossed around. You'll hear corp to corp. You'll hear 1099, which actually is just technically a tax form that's given to businesses and vendor payments. You'll hear sole proprietor. You'll hear a variety of things, but we're just going to call those independent contractors for the time being. One of the things, there's a myth, and I've actually heard a number of UK people have this myth in their idea, which is, well, the worker gets to decide. It's up to the worker. That may be true to some degree in the UK. I can't attest one way or the other. I'm not a UK expert, but in the US, that is definitely not the case. There are multiple federal level laws at the Department of Labor level, the Fair Labor Standards Act level, et cetera, and state level laws that dictate how a worker is supposed to be engaged. There's multiple tests, the ABC test, there's other tests, and those tests vary. And then I literally had a 3-hour conversation about this that was very expensive with an attorney just a couple of weeks ago, because we're continually updating our compliance protocols to be both legally informed and business reasonable. But the short of it is whoever's the employer of record, the agent of record, whoever's engaging that worker, it's ultimately their job, and to a degree the end client's job, to make sure that the worker is properly classified. And if a worker is engaged as an independent contractor, and the law would state they should be a W-2, if there is an audit, the penalties are massive. And I'm not trying to create a bunch of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I'm just telling you that, like, people can, like, on the call, hop on Claude, hop on Grok, go research it. It's 3 years or so of back penalties, taxes, overtime wages, plus additional penalties and fines. My attorney called it a treble penalty. So it's a triple penalty, and it can get really expensive. So that's the hot potato. The challenge that's really real world for staffing companies is that when they engage a worker, a lot of times an independent contractor will say, well, I've done this for years, and this is how I want to be engaged. Well, the laws have changed. The laws are not what they used to be. Audits are up. And so there's a continual tightening there, and there's a continual risk for staffing companies if they fall out of compliance.
We have seen that change in the UK as well. I mean, back under the old 35 rules, as a contractor, you decided whether you're in or out. And but the trouble was that meant individual investigations. So then what happened is the rules got changed. So now the public sector started with in I think it was probably about 2017, and then the private sector in 2021. And yeah, what you've seen is the worker doesn't decide anymore. And I don't know, I'd imagine, and I recall in the States, it's a lot easier to go for that W-2 because it just takes a lot of the risk away for all the parties.
It's absolutely easier to do from a compliance standpoint for the staffing company. Some end clients will require only W-2 for this reasons, the one that are savvy. So for everybody, it makes sense, except for the government, it makes sense for, because they get all their taxes. The friction point comes up where the individuals, the workers, they're trying to, and I'm not, it is what it is. They're trying to, in some cases, avoid taxes or minimize taxes. And the recruiters, because the recruiters don't have to pay the taxes for the worker, sometimes they will make more margin. Not all the time. Markups on independent contractors are lower than markups on W-2. So it's not the huge swing that people sometimes think that it is in terms of margin. But when you've got a recruiter, just real world, when you've got a recruiter and they've got Susie Q, the independent contractor, who wants to be engaged like an independent contractor, and they've got a role to fill, and Susie says, I'm not going to do this if I don't go W-2, that's hard, right? It's hard for the recruiter. They want to make that placement. And so that's where the rub is. But I will say, it's funny. 3 months ago, I was at the state capitol of Georgia at an annual staffing event, and one of the legislators came in, and this was not the core topic, but he actually brought it up, and he was talking about worker classification. And he said one of his top priorities for the next few years is to increase audits for worker classification, because he estimates that the state is missing out on tens and tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. So there's a financial reason, there's a logical reason that the audits are up, and it's money at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And are those audits, company level audits as well? So, it's not just you have to be unlucky as one worker, but if it's a serial thing across a company, right, we want to know everyone's classification.
Yeah, essentially the way that it's normally going to happen is you're going to have an independent contractor. And Susie Q, the independent contractor, is getting paid and she's happy. And then one day something happens and she's frustrated. She looks over and she says, oh, well, Bob's getting overtime and I'm not getting overtime. Or you didn't pay me exactly down to the penny what you're supposed to pay me. I'm going to file a complaint. And when that person files a complaint, when that independent contractor files a complaint and they say, I should be getting overtime, but I'm not, and they've classified me as an independent contractor, that is the number one most common reason for an audit. Government's going to come in, whether it's the state government that's received the complaint or the federal government. They're going to say, okay, let's take a look at your case. And by the way, employer, let's take a look at everybody else on your books. And that's where the problems can arise.
As I recall, when I was doing work in the States, a lot of the reason that the clients wanted W-2 was because they wanted to take away the risk of being the deemed employer as well. So it wasn't only from a tax, but also from a legal protection point of view.
Yeah, I mean, there's merit there as well because they're trying to defray the risk and have the independent contractors carry insurances, and that to me is a very legitimate reason to have somebody be an independent contractor. I won't take issue with that per se. And I will say this: as a business, it's our job to be compliant. It's also our job to help our clients get deals done and do business in spite of a very frustrating government and legislation that doesn't make sense, and legislation that you can have 5 different attorneys speak on, and they're all going to start talking in circles because there's a lot of gray area. And so one of the things that we really try to do is we're going to, if there's a spectrum of hyper conservative, which is basically we're going to classify everybody's W-2 as an EOR, and then the other side of the spectrum, which is somebody doesn't know what they're doing, and and I hear this in marketplace, some EORs that are startups basically saying, hey, workers can choose whatever they want. We're going to be in the middle of that, erring as much as we reasonably can to allowing an independent contractor, but it has to be reasonable and it has to be sufficiently compliant for us. So like I said, we try to be legally informed, compliant, but business reasonable.
Yeah, it's one of those things as commercial director for the group, black and white. You've at one end you've got perfect compliance and you're doing everything, and at the other end is the Wild West, and you have to find that level of grey where it works, because you can spend so much time focusing on dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and then you just lose business to the people who are. So I think it's about balancing commercial risk is probably the way I'd look at it, because you're right, there is no hard and fast black and white rule. And like you say, if you ask 5 solicitors, 5 attorneys, you're going to get 5 different answers, if indeed you get an answer at all.
Yeah, and as we all know as business owners, pricing risk is incredibly difficult, right? I mean, unless you're just an actuary with massive, data sets and that sort of thing. And so that is part of the value. We go back to trying to be helpful for, just the folks on the call, getting really practical. This is one of those areas where when you come in the US, the only 2 things that I think really matter for a staffing and recruiting company to focus on is finding clients and making placements. All this other noise, all the compliance risk, all these other things, it's important. You don't want to mess it up, but this is where the value of an employer of record, whether it's us or somebody else, can come into play. I will also say it's really important that whenever one of your clients is engaging in the US, that they really take a look at who is responsible for classification, who's responsible for it. Because in some cases, I've seen clients use like an EOR for W-2s, and then they'll just like, oh, we'll just pay the independent contractors ourselves. And it's like, well, by default, you are now responsible for classification, so you better know what you're doing, or you better use somebody else who has. So just make sure it's a conscious decision, however you decide to manage that hot potato.
One of the things you touched on earlier, I thought was quite interesting, and I'm wondering if you're seeing it in your industry, is put it into Claude, put it into ChatGPT. Are you seeing are you seeing people being misadvised and making mistakes because of their reliance on AI, Jim?
It's a good question. I mean, I think like most of us anecdotally here, I'd say they probably are, right? But I wouldn't say that I've got a ton of insight into what exactly my clients are doing on AI or what they're not, that sort of thing. Normally, it's where I'll get a call, and they'll be asking me. They'll say, "Hey, AI says this. You're saying this. What do you think?" And we'll try to walk them through it and give them something more concrete than make sure there's no hallucinations going on, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I would say. That's what this is an area you don't want to get wrong, basically.
Yeah, you definitely don't. And I had a situation, it was probably 9 months ago now, where there was a tax question, and it was really funny because literally my accountant told me one thing. I did an AI search and I sent it to him and I said, "This is what AI says." And he says, "That's funny because here's my AI search." And they were completely opposite. And so it's a little dated because the technology has already improved. But yeah, this is where good counsel and having third parties are going to actually assume the risk, not just tell you about it, but actually assume the risk can be really helpful.
I think the other thing as well about specialism, I mean, someone was talking, the large language models are absolutely fantastic, but you don't need your brain surgeon to be a rocket scientist. So the whole thing is around niche and specialization in terms of that knowledge. And AI will give you the cleft notes, it will give you the headlines. It won't give you certainly right now, but that level of detailed experience also as well. We were talking earlier about, it'll give you a binary result. It'll give you that black or white result. It won't necessarily give you your nuances and your risk profile and your look and your feel and your smell for it.
Yeah, well, my wife is a family therapist, like a marriage and couples therapist, and it's the same thing in her field, right? Because the people are in many ways feeling very confident about their marital decisions and other things because the confidence that AI is communicating to them, and it's just an echo chamber in a lot of these cases. So we all know this; it's true in our industry, and there's security things that have to be kept in mind. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Okay, I'm still not having any questions, so obviously we're doing a great job of explaining it. So I guess middle of 2026, we sit here end of July, and so what? Geez, 5 months to go of the year. How's the year been? We won't debate the rights and the wrongs of the politics, but the politics have had an impact. And where do you see this market going?
I mean, fortunately, at least for us, when I look anecdotally at our sample set and then I look at the staffing reports, they share the same message that we've seen, which is Q1 and Q2 have picked up and stabilized. I could throw darts at the wall and guess why is that? Are people finally ignoring our politicians with all the uncertainty, or people just tired of holding back? But at least in the sectors that we primarily operate in, the staffing industry is at least stabilized over here quite nicely, especially from what I've heard relative to the UK market. There's certainly sectors where margins are still strong, money is being made. So these are all positive things. That can change as always tomorrow, but it's not taking off, right? This is not COVID, but it's also not bottoming out. It's been that steady, slow recovery is what we've seen. And I would say actually, Q1, Q2, like those, we've, at least for our sample set, it's been the best that we've seen in a while.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that reflected, and a couple of the quoted businesses, their US numbers look good. I always look for the US as a bellwether for the UK and Europe subsequently. Yeah. They're normally first into the downturn and first out. Other question as well. Have you seen a shift in the sort of profile of work? With you read and hear about the big tech company layoffs, but other sectors appear to be growing and thriving. So are there certain sectors that are up and down? Are there certain states that are up and down? Are there any sort of trends that people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been true for probably a few months now. I think there's some really stable ones out there that it sort of tend to be stable, right? Financial services, bio, life sciences, pharma, that sort of thing. We've seen pharma continue to be really, really strong. We're also starting to have clients that are really getting into robotics, and not just really advanced automation robotics, but more like testers or sort of like the downstream side of the AI boom. So It doesn't have to be a $300 an hour software developer. I think there's money to be made. We're seeing our clients make money way downstream, even with some low pay rates, but they're doing training or other sort of almost manual tasks, for some of the AI companies at the end of the day. In terms of the cities, where we continue to see, a lot of growth, New York, especially around financial services, always going to be strong. BioLife Sciences, Pharma, Boston, Raleigh, the sort of the tri-city area, tri-state area up there in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill sort of area. Other cities, Austin, we have a lot of clients actually that launch in Austin. I hear a lot about Miami. For whatever reason, we don't have as many clients in Miami, but all the reports would suggest that there's a solid market there. So, the one thing I would say is, like, for UK companies, especially for the folks on the call, if you're getting started, I would also just keep in mind the time zone difference. Like, California might be great. It's also really prickly, and it's also 3 hours late, more of a time difference. I think there's a lot of money to be made on the East Coast or East Coast and Central hours, which would take you all the way over to Austin, Texas, and over towards the East Coast. I think there's a lot of business to be had there.
Yeah, that's generally my advice. Find out where your market is, your niche is on the East Coast, and then expand from there. And also as well, try and keep the discipline. Just because you can place on the West Coast, it doesn't always mean you should. You can't service it as well. Also as well, the first hop I generally recommend people make, if they're actually physically going there, is going to be to the East Coast. But what you do see, what I have seen, is a real trend around UK companies following, picking certain towns. It started in New York, then it's San Francisco, then places like, as you say, Austin. We're now seeing Florida, Tampa, Miami, but also places that have actually just good infrastructure links. What was quite funny was when S3 started in San Diego. Everyone was just wondering why we'd gone there. They missed some market opportunity. I think it's just because Scott wanted to live there. So so don't always follow the competition.
It's always 70 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny.
Yeah. So don't always assume they've got the business case right, but definitely as well, and also as well, the other thing to look for is available talent to fuel your business. It's not always just about your customers. It's about who you're competing against. Are there loads of other staffing companies there? Is it do they have good schools there where people want to stay in the cities where you can bring on graduates to come work for you? So there's a lot of considerations in that. So
this is where it goes back to like what we opened up with around getting niche. I think that it's almost like an investment thesis. If you say, this is the type of company that I want to serve, this is the type of role that I want to serve, is it going to be remote, not non-remote? These are the pay rates that I'm looking for. Okay, once you get really, really dialed in on that, and do I have current client connections maybe in the UK that have sister companies, or can I get a referral over there? Like, once you get really, really tight on that, then you begin to overlay that against the US and say, okay, where on the East Coast would it make sense for me to find that first 1, 2, or 3 customers? The more focus that you can have, like, right up front. I know I feel like I'm stating probably the obvious, but it probably bears repeating, because it can just save a lot of time, money, and investment and stress if you get really, really clear on that. Then the cities become, I think, a little bit easier to pick.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of if people want to get hold of you, want to start engaging, is it actually just call me when you've got the jobs, or should we be having a chat a few months before? And if they're doing perm in the US or thinking about doing contract, have a chat now so we can just set up, and when you're ready to go, you're ready to go.
Yeah, I have chats all across the spectrum. Sometimes it's last minute, just got your name, we've got a contract, we're ready to place, what do we do, right? All the way to, this is probably going to be a Q1 next year, but I want to go and get my ducks in a row and understand, how this is going to work. Can we have a chat? So absolutely reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn, Charles Causey, Agile Partnering, and absolutely happy to have a conversation. And, if there's any questions that people have in terms of that we can answer in terms of our services or the market, what we see working, what we don't see working, we're always happy to help.
Fantastic. We've got a question from Richard Morton. Hi, Charles. Have you seen any international medical recruitment companies established in the US? For context, we place board certified medical specialists into hospitals. Thanks for the question, Richard.
Yeah, I don't think that we work. I mean, that's niche, which I love, by the way. Fantastic, Richard. Go for it. We definitely worked in the healthcare space before. We used to do locum tenens. We used to do traveling nurses, all those things. We pulled out of that space for a few different reasons. The higher level, though, what you're talking about, totally doable. And yeah, give me a buzz. We can certainly talk about it. We talk about how to engage those workers. As soon as you get in the medical space, there are, and if they're in hospitals, there's going to be various insurance requirements that need to be thought through in terms of how to engage those. That can be a tricky space to navigate, and I'd be happy to talk through that. Good question.
I guess that's one of the things as well. I mean, the risk appetites, EORs as well does vary as well. So, and but being able to go in and potentially look at specialist niches as well, I guess makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. And, the risk appetite can be, a lot of the risk appetite for most EORs is going to be focused on the worker compensation side, which is the insurance for anybody who doesn't know, in the US that pays workers if they get hurt on the job. It's effectively a privatized market. It's not a public market like it would be in the UK or in Canada. And private carriers have a lot of say in terms of what they're willing to accept versus not. So workers' comp is going to dictate risk, as well as the actual credit risk of the clients if they're funding it, and the legal risk, that is, who's responsible for, to Richard's point, how are we engaging the doctor? If the doctor goes and kills a patient, who's responsible for that? These are all things that need to be worked through at the contractual level.
I think the other thing this brings me back to, and apologies for anyone who's been on one of these with me before or yourself around this, is the biggest thing I find that scares people from the UK is they see how much this costs. So they look at so in the UK market, the umbrella market is relatively commoditized, and the fees are significantly lower. You don't have the workers' comp arrangement there. So people are, and actually the worker foots that as well. So it's a massive surprise when people see that, okay, you're taking what percentage? And but they're only looking at one side of the coin. They're not looking at, but actually still after that, you should be clearing 25-30% margins aren't unheard of and are pretty normal.
Yeah, I mean, I can walk you through some just generic numbers real quickly to allay that concern. And it's hard. I think apples and oranges when you're comparing the UK versus the USA. Every country is different. Burdens are different. Risks are different. Complexity is different, right? And obviously the USA is a lot more complex. And so in the US, for a W-2 worker, typical markup, so average markup, this is an important number for everybody here, average markup on the pay rate is going to be about 60%. Sometimes it's going to be lower if you're working with MSPs, enterprises. They're going to try to push you down to 45%, but somewhere between the 45 to 60% markup.
So for us tax, we'll charge $160 and the worker will get $100.
That's exactly right. So $100 on the W-2, $160 bill rate, right? And we were talking about working with small, mid-sized firms. That's reasonable. Then on top of that, you're going to have to pay all the employer burdens plus an EOR fee if you're using an EOR. So let's just say that your burdens on that worker are going to be somewhere between like 9 to 12%. Depends on how long the worker's been there, what their pay rate is, if they elected benefits or not, somewhere in that range. Let's just call it 12%. Most of our clients are not at 12%, but we'll call it 12% for easy numbers. And then from 12%, let's say you're paying, say, 17.5 or 18% to an employer of record. The employer of record in that scenario at 18% is getting 6%. That means that your total payout there is $118, right? Because that's the burdens plus the EOR fee. And your bill rate's $160, you're still making $42 an hour of margin, if I've got my numbers correct, right? And take out some funding costs, call it 20%, 21%. You're somewhere in the realm of still making 28, 30% margin. That's not bad. As a matter of fact, it's a lot better than the UK business. Business margins, as you know, obviously, and even better than I do, which is why a lot of people come over here. So at the end of the day, I don't think that's very expensive, but that's how the numbers shake out.
Yeah, and it's not just the percentage. The wage rates are generally higher as well. So that's right. Yeah, and the other
salaries are higher. There's no garden leave here, so velocity of placements, especially on the permanent side, is going to move a lot faster, and it's a bigger market. These are all the reasons that people come over here. It's not perfect. Obviously, there's time zone difference, there's challenges, but it's a great market to make a lot of money in.
And how do the Americans feel about the English coming over? They kicked us out a good few years ago. Are they delighted that we're coming back?
Well, I'm going to speak for me because I was there with my jersey on at the England-Argentina game, yawning my heart out. So I felt like you guys were very welcome, and most people like your accents.
All right, that's certainly good to hear. Well, no more questions, Charles. As always, it's great to chat. We'll do this again in a month. We'll find an interesting topic. We won't have played any more football games, so we can't talk about that. But wishing you all the best. Wishing you all the best with your DIY challenges, paint-wise, and just remind people how they can get hold of you again.
Yeah, just look for Charles Causey, Agile Partnering, and find me on LinkedIn. Super easy. And Andy, I really appreciate it. I always enjoy these conversations.
So don't ask ask Charles.
Yeah, there you go. USA, ask Charles, Agile Partnering. Find me on LinkedIn. And I really am happy to be a resource to anybody on the call. No pressure. Here to help.
Thanks, Charles. Catch up soon.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. See you.